My name is Kara Vance. I am 46 years old, a colonel in the United States Army Cyber Command. Tomorrow I will walk into Westbridge Technologies in my crisp military uniform, sit across from my father, Thomas Vance, and my brother, Brandon Vance, and watch as they realize that the daughter they fired now holds final approval for their largest defense contract. 5 years ago, I left home to my family's dismay. She chose military service over a master's degree in business and a position at my father's company. Tonight, I return home for dinner so they can talk to me one last time. Tomorrow, they will call me Colonel Vance, and in that moment, everything will change. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, tracing the quilt my grandmother once sewed for me. My fingers moved over each faded square, lilac, pale yellow navy, with little white dots. I remembered lying here at 17, fresh acceptance letter to Stanford, on my chest, feeling like the entire world might finally open. Back then, the future felt like a straight road, lined with signs pointing forward, forward, forward. Then came the military officer training scholarship. Then came my father's words. The military is for people who don't have real potential. You were always meant for more. He spat it like a sentence final and irrevocable. In his mind, more meant a degree in finance, a corner office under his wing, perhaps someday. A vice presidency, if I learned obedience. In mine, more was never about status. It was about becoming someone unbreakable. The rooms smelled the same. Lavender sachets in the dresser drawers, floor polish, old secrets. On the shelves above my desk sat trophies and framed certificates. Debate champion basketball, MVP, National Honor Society. But nothing from the past decade. None of my commendations from Cyber Command. None of the medals earned defending systems that would have crippled hospitals and air traffic if breached. None of the citations for leadership that saw teams through 18-hour counter-infiltration missions. Because to them, those were not real achievements. They were the symptoms of a daughter gone astray. At 0500, I rose. Ritual steadied me. I laid my uniform on the bed. Midnight blue. Wool pressed to perfection. Ribbons arranged precisely above the breast pocket. Polished eagle insignia catching the dim light. I rolled a lint brush over the sleeves twice, 3 times until even invisible dust was gone. My boots gleamed edges crisp. Every thread, every crease, every metal glint said one truth: I am here. I am undeniable. By 0600, I was in the car. The world outside was still pale and hushed, highway lined with morning mist. As I drove, I rehearsed nothing. There was nothing to prove, nothing to argue. Only presence, only performance. When I pulled into Westbridge Technologies, the DoD reserved spot was empty waiting for me. I stepped out into the brisk morning feeling concrete beneath my soles, the way it anchored me to the earth. A guard at the checkpoint snapped to attention. "Good morning, Colonel." The words brushed across old wounds like antiseptic, stinging healing necessary. Inside the lobby gleamed sterile white glass elevators rising behind a marble reception. Business suits moved in choreographed urgency, lanyards, swinging eyes, flicking up then away. But some looked twice, saw the uniform, straightened their posture without realizing. In the elevator, my reflection stood tall against mirrored walls. Dark hair twisted into a tight bun, eyes steady, shoulders squared beneath silver eagles. At floor 26, the doors slid open, and there he was. Brandon! He stood by the window scrolling through a presentation on his tablet, posture relaxed. He didn't see me at first, then his gaze lifted, and confusion spread across his face, like a slow stain. "Kara, what is that? Why are you dressed like?" I didn't stop. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. I'm here for the project review." He blinked, mouth parting as if to object. But before he could, another voice cut through the corridor. "Colonel Vance!" Lorraine Hart, CEO of Westbridge, approached with brisk purpose. Her white cropped hair framed a lined but powerful face. When she saw me, her lips curved into a smile. "I didn't realize you'd be attending in person. I thought it would be beneficial." "It absolutely is." She turned to the gathered executives. "Everyone, for those unaware, this is Colonel Kara Vance, our Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. She holds final approval authority for all military integrations." Silence rippled outward like shockwaves. Brandon lowered his tablet slightly. I didn't look at my father, Thomas Vance, standing just behind the team in tailored navy. I didn't need to. His silence vibrated through the hall. In the boardroom, my name sat on a placard at the head of the table beside Lorraine's. I pulled out the chair, sat down, laid my notes before me. Engineers, directors, and program managers filed in, each one, pausing to read my name, then my insignia. Some looked surprised at my age. More looked surprised I was a woman. But none questioned my rank after the first glance. The meeting began promptly at 0900. Lorraine opened the session with a short briefing, then handed it over to me. "Thank you," I said. My voice carried without strain. "As of last week, Project Sentinel's cybersecurity and integration benchmarks were behind schedule. I've reviewed your mitigation plan and will require revisions on 3 critical components prior to the next funding round." I outlined each in clear, concise language. I called on the comm to explain redundant pathways for data security. I requested the systems engineer provide revised timelines by end of day. I made eye contact. I didn't soften directives. I didn't apologize for clarity, because my authority was not granted by their comfort. Then it was Brandon's turn. He stood slowly, gaze darting between his laptop and me. His voice trembled as he began outlining Phase 2 rollout. "I believe the strategy aligns with performance targets and should integrate within Q3 projections." I waited until he finished before speaking. "Mr. Vance," I said evenly, "could you clarify how your proposed method accounts for the latency thresholds specified in the Pentagon's most recent integration memo?" His mouth opened-closed. I can revisit that portion. You'll need to. Benchmarks are non-negotiable. Please revise your protocol draft and submit it by Thursday, Kobe." He nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." The room stilled, a silent reckoning passing between every executive. We moved on. I led the next agenda item without pause, because for me, nothing had changed. For them, everything had. The meeting adjourned afternoon. Lorraine ended with reminders of transparency and rigorous timelines. Colonel Vance will remain on site for follow-up assessments, extend full access, and support. As people filed out, I felt eyes linger. Not with curiosity anymore, but with recognition. The kind earned, never given. When the boardroom emptied, only Thomas Vance remained. He hovered by the glass door, arms folded, gaze, lost somewhere between disbelief and something older, sadder. "Kara," he said quietly, the way a man might speak at a graveside. "We need to talk." I turned to him, standing at ease, hands clasped behind my back. Calm, unbreakable. "Yes, sir." He swallowed hard, jaw flexing as though fighting words he'd never rehearsed. "I underestimated you completely." I met his gaze without bitterness, only truth. "I know. The first time I had blood on my hands was when I was 20. Not with a rifle, not on the sands of a battlefield. It was in a sterile command room lit only by a glowing green screen in the pre-dawn hours. I sat at the console, headphones pressed to my ears, feeling sweat under my body armor, despite the cold air conditioning. "Target acquired," the tactical officer whispered into the radio. "Orders, ma'am." I scanned the feed. Infrared outlined the commander in bright yellow against a dark background. The feel of the transitions between truck signals to the men carrying the crates of surface-to-air missiles we'd been tracking for weeks. My pulse was ready trained for this job. But inside I had a tremor in my bones that no trainer could touch. I thought of the civilians in the distance, the helicopter units they would shoot down in the morning sky, the defense lines they would exploit next. I thought of the faces of the soldiers in that convoy, the mothers who answered the phones at dawn with the soft voices of chaplains. "Orders, Colonel," he repeated. I fell silent again, watching the commander's flickering movements. He looked ordinary, thin, short-haired. A calloused hand scratched his cheek as he shouted instructions. My hand slid across the confirmation order. On the screen, the Reaper's drone receiver stopped to the right. Just press it once. That was it. A wave of the hand through the circuits and codes, activating the Hellfire missile from the high legs of the cargo. Fire and steel, silent and impersonal, delivering death without him even hearing it. I remembered what my instructor had said at Fort Gordon. We don't kill people. We neutralize threats. But I wasn't thinking about the threat. I was thinking about his mother. If she cried, like my mother cried when I left for my first deployment, if she had a prayer formula that night that her son would survive to see tomorrow, if she, like me, held a small framed photo every morning before the sun rose, whispering the same words over and over again, "Please keep them safe. Please bring them home." My hand shook just once. Then it stopped. "Do it," I said. The missile fell in a white blur. I was silent. Then, and touch. The infrared feed exploded in black petals where his heat signature had disappeared. The trucks were destroyed in a wave of fire and dust, debris like frightened birds. The men screamed. The communications equipment called out the confirmation. Target neutralized. I sat down listening haphazardly. The command room was filled with checklists and shifting shoes. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. "Yes, ma'am." I nodded but didn't answer. On the screen, the red wreckage burned in a sea of nothingness. A gentle wave rose into the sky, stretching toward the dawn like an accusation. That night, I lay in bed staring straight at the steel bars above. My chest felt heavy like an anchor, pulling me down through the layers of mattresses and plywood and concrete straight to the ground. I tried to picture his face, but it faded at the edges, disappearing before I could see it. All that remained was the memory of my finger pressing down. Clear the last barrier between reason and consequence. People think murder comes with rage or triumph, or a taste of justice. For me, it comes with silence. A silence too deep to speak. A silence that settled in my bones like cold rain through the fatigue of winter field exercises. It never went away afterward. I just learned to move with it, to function as its weight cut into my lungs. 2 days later, my team received a performance commendation. My name was at the top of the citation. When I called home that week, I asked if I had looked into MBA programs. He told me that Brandon had just closed a major client account. "He's making a move," he said proudly. "What about you?" I gasped eagerly, looking at my reflection in the dusty barracks window. The sunlight hit the old U.S. Army insignia on my weapon, making it stand out clearly. "I'm doing my job," I said quietly. "Okay," he replied, distracted girls' papers on the table. "Don't waste too much time there. The real world is waiting for you." I was in front of the server. That night, I went to my own control room. The lights were dimmed. The monitors were on standby. I sat at the console and opened the archived footage from the attack. Frame by frame, I watched each harsh moment. I studied the thermal signature that had missed me. With just a smooth eye, I still carried that silence. It calmed my voice. It balanced my gaze. Because once you held life and death in your hands, no CEO's enlightenment or moderation meant anything. Their words were just noise. My silence was worth it. I never talked about the first kill mission. Not a group of mine. Not my superiors. The summer solstice should not have had the position of priest next to me in the report meeting on the redevelopment of the mine, but it always stayed with me like a hidden mark under the blue suit. And sometimes on nights like tonight, sitting across the dinner table from a father who still believes my life is nothing but wasted potential, I will remember the face of that man as it burst forth and dissolved. I will remember the mother he left behind. I will remember my own mother's silent prayers, and I will promise both of them, if I had to do it again to keep another convoy, moving to keep another soldier alive, I would. Because leadership isn't about who's at the top of the table. It's about who bears the consequences that someone doesn't want to touch. 3 days later, I was back at Westbridge Technologies. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and expensive ink pens. Ceiling lights buzzed softly overhead. Executives murmured greetings as they filed in, each avoiding eye contact with me until absolutely necessary. The Pentagon insignia on my badge had that effect. I sat at the head of the table, posture straight, hands folded over my notes. Across from me, Brandon shuffled through his slides, face pale under the fluorescent glow. His blazer was navy today, darker than usual, as if the color might lend him gravity. He hadn't spoken to me since the last meeting. Not about latency thresholds, not about dinner with Dad, not about the fact that I could end his career with a single recommendation. He avoided my eyes each time he entered the room, choosing instead to anchor himself to the familiar orbit of executives who still saw him as the Golden Sun. Colonel Vance Lorraine Hart said from my left, her voice cutting through the hum of idle chatter. Mr. Vance will present the revised systems integration strategy you requested. I inclined my head once. Proceed. Brandon cleared his throat. On screen, the opening slide flickered to life. Westbridge Technologies logo, gleaming in blue and steel. Thank you, Miss Hart. Colonel Vance, he began, voice tight. In response to your previous feedback, my team has restructured the Phase 2 integration rollout to align with the Pentagon's latency requirements. His fingers clicked the remote rapidly, flipping through schematics, performance charts, layered protocol matrices. Words poured from him in rehearsed bursts. I watched his hands tremble ever so slightly each time he advanced the slide. Halfway through, he stumbled over an acronym. Silence spread across the room like spilled ink. His eyes darted to mine, pleading for an interruption he would have scorned years ago when we were children at the dinner table. And I forgot a line in my science fair speech. I said nothing. Let him gather himself. Let him taste the silence he once filled so easily. He swallowed and continued voice-dropping to a tighter register as he described firewall redundancies and cross-domain solutions. Finally, the last slide blinked onto the screen. Project Sentinel, Phase 2, Integrated Deployment Strategy. He exhaled shakily. That concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions. Lorraine turned to me, eyes sharp. Colonel! I leaned back, folding my arms over my chest. My uniform jacket creaked softly with the motion. I studied the final slide in silence, reading each bullet point, each confidence interval, and implementation timeline. My gaze drifted to the bottom right corner where his team's logo sat, embedded in white. Then I lifted my eyes to his. Mr. Vance, I said evenly, your team's revised protocol demonstrates significant improvements since Monday. However, I let the word hang in the stale air. His shoulders stiffened. You've neglected to integrate the dual authentication gateways specified under Directive 845B. He blinked, face draining of color. I thought we included those within the auxiliary redundancy streams. No, I replied. My voice was calm, clinical, absolute. What you've included are standard Tier 2 gateways. Directive 845B Requires Tier 3 dual auth with cryptographic mutual attestation. Failure to implement will result in an automatic security veto from our office." The room fell silent. Only the quiet mechanical whir of the projector filled the pause. Brandon's hands clenched on the remote until his knuckles whitened. "I can integrate those protocols before deployment," he said, voice nearly a whisper. "You will integrate them before approval," I corrected. His eyes flickered up to mine. For a split second, I saw the boy he used to be, cocky grin basketball in hand, father's praise fresh on his shoulders. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man whose confidence was cracking under the quiet certainty of someone he never thought he'd answer to. "Understood, Colonel," he said. I turned to Lorraine. "Pending those integrations, the strategy is acceptable for Phase 2 review. I expect updated drafts by COB Thursday." She nodded briskly. "We'll make it happen." "Good." I closed my folder, the sound crisp in the silent room. Let's proceed to the next agenda item. As the meeting rolled on, I felt Brandon's eyes on me, flickering between resentment and something else. Something older. Recognition, maybe. Or regret. But I didn't look at him again. He wasn't my mission today. My mission was ensuring every line of code, every gateway, every schematic was strong enough to keep people alive. After adjournment, he caught me alone in the hallway outside the tinted windows that overlooked the city skyline. His voice was small, stripped of its public performance. "Kara," he said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" I turned silent, waiting. "Why didn't you humiliate me in there?" His eyes searched mine, confused. "You could have. I would have if it were you." Eyed him for a moment, taking in the tailored suit, the silk tie, the faint smell of expensive cologne clinging to him like armor. Then I shook my head. "I wasn't there to humiliate you," I said. "I was there to do my job." He swallowed, looking away toward the city sprawling beyond the glass. "You're good at it," he whispered. The words seemed to scrape his throat on the way out. "I know," I said. I turned and walked away before he could reply. My boots struck tile in quiet rhythm each step, an echo of the woman he never saw becoming. The woman who didn't need his approval to exist fully. The woman who had learned long ago that power didn't live in dominance or pride or praise. It lived in presence, in precision, in performance. And that day, standing in a glass tower built by men who never believed I'd be anything I carried with me, the first life I ever took the lives I'd protected since, and the unbreakable truth carved into my bones: I am not here to win your game. I am here because your game cannot run without me. I was halfway to the parking structure when my phone vibrated. A priority encrypted call. The display read, "Cybercom OPS. Urgent." I stepped into the shadowed alcove between two conference rooms, pressed accept, and entered my 6-digit authentication. The line clicked alive with a hiss of static before stabilizing into a familiar voice. Colonel Vance said Major Reese. Her tone clipped, controlled. "We have an incident." My pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. Focus sharpening like a blade honed to glass-edge thinness. "Go ahead. There's been a breach." She paused, letting the weight of the word settle. "Preliminary forensic analysis confirms classified Sentinel schematics were accessed last night from an external node routed through Westbridge's secondary VPN cluster." For a moment, the quiet between us vibrated with tension. Beyond the alcove's frosted glass, I saw executives laughing over catered sandwiches, unaware of the fire flickering beneath their feet. "Scope?" I asked. "We're still determining exfil limits." "But, Colonel, the signature matches known proxies from Aurelius. The contractor flagged in last quarter's counterintelligence sweep." My jaw tightened. "Aurelius? Private? Unregulated? funded through off-book channels spanning 3 continents, where intelligence operations went to disappear, where traitors sold their country for private gain. No ideology required. Do we have containment partially? The node was severed within 30 seconds, but partial blueprints were confirmed outbound, enough to compromise Sentinel's strategic advantage if leveraged correctly. Outside, a jet roared past the skyline. My reflection in the glass flickered with its shadow uniform dark against the pale morning beyond. For a second, I saw the ghost of the girl who once believed defense projects were only about protection, never politics. Recommendations, Reese asked quietly. I inhaled once deep and silent, letting oxygen feed my war calculus. Lock down all Sentinel-accessible servers under Tier 4 protocols. Full credential reissuance. Immediate SOC audit for insider facilitation. Prepare counterintelligence liaisons for covert intercept operations. I'll coordinate with them within the hour. Yes, ma'am. She hesitated, then voice dropping. Colonel, do you think it's internal sabotage? My eyes drifted back to the conference room I'd left minutes before. Brandon's presentation notes still sat open on the table, his laptop connected to the secure projector feed. I remembered the trembling in his fingers, the flicker of panic when I mentioned Directive 845B, the quiet desperation in his eyes. Everyone is a suspect, I said calmly, until proven otherwise. Understood. Ops out. The line clicked dead. I slipped my phone back into its thigh pocket and exhaled slowly. The corridor around me smelled of antiseptic and manufactured lemon, clean, bright, sterile. A place that pretended danger was always elsewhere. I walked back to the boardroom. The cleanup crew was already clearing cups and crumb-filled napkins. Brandon was still there standing at the window staring out at the city below. His posture looked small against the glass expanse. For a moment I saw him not as my brother but as a systems lead, whose failure might endanger soldiers he'd never meet. He turned when he sensed me. His eyes flicked over my face, searching for softness. There was none. Kara, he started, voice strained. Did something happen? You left suddenly. I looked at him silent, reading micro-expressions the way I read code. Pattern anomaly. Intention. Project Sentinel was breached last night, I said. His mouth fell open. Breached. How that's impossible, we had protocols, I interrupted. They weren't enough. He shook his head rapidly, hands rising in protest. No, my team's endpoint security was clean. I checked it myself. Unless his words trailed off into silence. Unless what I asked voice flat. He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. Unless someone routed through a private credential. But Kara, no one has root access except you, I finished. His eyes widened. You can't think His voice cracked. I wouldn't risk this. Not for anything. Then who on your team would I ask quietly? His mouth opened and closed soundless. Beyond the glass clouds gathered over the skyline shadows curling over bright steel towers. In their reflections, I saw us standing inches apart, the soldier and the son, the interrogator, and the accused. I need your full access logs by 1400, I said. He flinched like I'd struck him. You're serious. Deadly, I replied. Because that's exactly what this breach could become. Tears welled in his eyes, unfallen. Kara! I swear to God I didn't. I studied him, feeling no rage, only a cold, focused clarity. The same clarity I felt when my first kill burned across a silent desert years ago. The clarity that said, do what must be done. Feel later. We'll see, I said. If you're innocent, then prove it. His shoulders shook once before he nodded, jaw tightening with wounded pride. I turned and walked away, boots striking tile in perfect cadence. Each step echoed through me like a countdown. Outside, rain began to streak the glass walls. Drops traced crooked paths down the steel frames, gathering in silent pools at the sill. I watched them for a moment, the way they merged and slid together into something heavier, unstoppable. Somewhere someone now held pieces of Sentinel. Pieces designed to protect soldiers who trusted their systems to remain unbreached. Someone had turned protection into profit. And as I strode back to my car, my mind mapped counterintelligence flowcharts and internal infiltration matrices with lethal precision. Because I knew this wasn't about one breach. It was a declaration of war from inside the walls. They thought a rift between father, son, and daughter was the family tragedy. But betrayal is always the final inheritance, and this time I would burn down anything and anyone who threatened what I had built to keep others alive. I requested the private conference room on the 27th floor. Soundproof walls, tinted glass, no cameras inside, just 2 chairs, a black stone table, and a single recessed light above. Brandon sat across from me, his blazer discarded on the chair, back sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was disheveled. Dark half circles smudged beneath his eyes like bruises. He looked smaller without his corporate armor, more human, more dangerous. I slid his team's access log summary across the table. The data sheet landed with a whisper, but he flinched like it was a gunshot. "Walk me through these entries," I said. His fingers hovered over the pages, trembling slightly, as he scanned line after line of timestamps, user IDs, endpoint node addresses. His lips moved silently, parsing each string of code and date and time. At line 38, he froze. This isn't right," he whispered. "This credential routing isn't mine." I leaned back, arms folded across my uniform chest. "It originated from your node." I know he snapped, then flinched again, softer now. "I know, but this isn't my routing pattern. Look at the final switch hop. I don't mask from tertiary node clusters. Whoever did this was sloppy. Or smart, I corrected. Sloppy enough to appear incompetent. Smart enough to embed within your credential trail and ensure forensic suspicion." He swallowed, hard eyes flicking to mine, searching for mercy he didn't deserve. And I didn't offer. "Who has your root access proxy?" I asked. "No one," he said too quickly. I tilted my head slightly. Silence expanded between us. Outside the tinted glass, the city glimmered under thinning clouds. Rain washed the steel towers clean, each droplet streaking downward like gravity, reclaiming its dues. "No one," I pressed, voice low. His shoulders slumped. "Mariel," he said, finally barely audible. "My wife. She has the backup token for emergencies. Define emergencies." He ran a hand through his hair, fingers tugging at the roots. "When I'm locked out after hours. When I'm on travel. She manages my schedules. Syncs credentials between devices when IT flags an error." I watched him for a long moment. The boy who once locked me out of Dad's office to read confidential deal memos for fun. The teenager who said with a grin, "You can't keep up with me, Kara." But here he sat, small and shaking. A systems lead compromised by his own complacency. "Does Mariel have Sentinel clearance?" I asked. "No," he said instantly, eyes wide. "Never. She only sees surface-level project outlines. I swear to you, Kara, she doesn't even know what Sentinel does." I nodded, once cold calculation moving behind my eyes. "Then she wouldn't understand what she sold." His breath hitched. What are you saying?" I leaned forward, elbows resting on the table's cold stone edge. "I'm saying that people betray for 3 reasons: desperation, ideology, or profit. Mariel has no ideology. She has no desperation, which leaves only one." He shook his head violently, tears springing to his eyes. No, she wouldn't." "Who recruited her?" I asked quietly. He stared at me like I had gutted him. Kara, please don't do this. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. My voice dropped to the register that made men freeze mid-sentence in Pentagon situation rooms. I am not your sister right now, Mr. Vance. I am your investigating officer. And if you do not give me a name, I will bring her in myself under counter-espionage protocols. You know what that entails. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Sweat dotted his temples. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, a sound like the earth rumbling awake beneath concrete foundations. Finally, he broke. She met someone, months ago, at a defense contractor networking gala. Said he was consulting on federal infrastructure protection. She thought it would help my career. That if she shared a surface project outlines, he could mentor me into a VP track. Name, I said. Ethan Wolfe, he whispered. From Aurelius. The name struck my chest like cold iron. I'd heard it before. Aurelius black budget contractors who laundered intelligence leaks into global private assets. Wolves among sheep. Their specialty infiltration through proximity. Spouses, assistants, secretaries. The people no one vetted because they were too close to question. I stood boot silent against polished floor. My shadow stretched across the table, swallowing the data sheet between us. I need you to remain here, I said. Do not contact her. Do not contact anyone. From this moment forward, you are a material witness in an active counter-espionage investigation. Tears slipped down his cheeks. Kara, I didn't know. My gaze softened just once. I know, I said quietly. But your ignorance doesn't undo the breach. He pressed his shaking hands to his eyes, shoulders collapsing inward. For a fleeting second, pity threatened my resolve. But I crushed it. Because pity never saved a life on the battlefield. Only clarity did. I left him there trembling, in silent sobs. Outside, I keyed my secure line to Major Reese. Target identified, I said. Initiate immediate surveillance on Ethan Wolfe and Mariel Vance. Lock down outbound comms. Freeze all external account activity. Understood, Colonel. Asset retrieval. Reese asked. Negative. Observation only. Until we map the entire infiltration vector, we cut nothing. Yes, ma'am. I ended the call and walked to the west windows overlooking the city. Gray clouds roiled above the skyline, like bruises spreading across skybone. Below, traffic snaked between towers, each glowing window. A little fortress of secrets, betrayals, fragile ambitions. I watched the rain streak down the glass, each drop merging with another gathering weight, until it plunged out of sight. Then I opened my tablet and began mapping the next phase. Identify Wolfe's active associates within Westbridge. Run behavioral analysis on Mariel's communication patterns past 6 months. Cross-reference Aurelius asset lists with known Sentinel contractors. Draft containment protocols for worst-case exposure scenario. My fingers moved swiftly, cold precision guiding every keystroke. Because betrayal wasn't a wound that healed. It was an infection, and I would not let it fester. They thought I was just a soldier. They thought my battlefield ended at the desert's edge. But they forgot I wage war in silence, in code, in consequence. And when I hunt, I do not miss. The bar was dark wood, and amber lights tucked beneath a boutique hotel downtown. It smelled of aged whiskey, and men wearing suits that fit too well to be off the rack. Jazz murmured low from ceiling speakers, brushed snares and upright bass curling around leather booths like cigarette smoke. I entered alone. My uniform was gone, replaced by black slacks, a charcoal blouse, and a tailored wool trench. My hair fell loose over my shoulders, concealing the comms bud tucked behind my left ear. I moved to the bar, each step silent on polished oak floors. Neat bourbon. Eagle Rare. If you have it, I told the bartender. My voice was calm, almost bored. As he poured, I scanned reflections in the mirrored shelves, bottles lined up like a gallery of amber eyes. Between a decanter of Hibiki and a row of Glenfiddich, I saw him. Ethan Wolfe, tall, mid-40s, tailored navy suit, pale blue shirt, no tie. Salt-streaked dark hair combed back in effortless precision. His posture screamed corporate confidence, but his eyes, they were predator calm. Watching, calculating. He sat in a corner booth half-shadowed, swirling a glass of Macallan in measured circles. As I paid, he raised his glass slightly in greeting, a faint smirk curling one side of his mouth. I took my drink and walked over. "Colonel Vance," he said softly, as I slid into the booth across from him. "Or do you prefer Kara tonight?" His voice was velvet wrapped around steel. Smooth, practiced, but with that glint of threat beneath every syllable. The voice of a man who never needed to raise his tone to kill. "That depends," I replied, sipping bourbon. The oaken caramel burned warm down my throat, grounding me in the moment. "Are we speaking professionally or personally?" He chuckled low. "Why not both, the close?" I saw the lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint scar along his left jawline half hidden by stubble. Markers of a life lived beyond boardrooms, markers of violence that never made it onto resumes. "I hear you've been busy," I said calmly, eyes holding his. "New assets, new acquisitions, new leaks." He shrugged lightly. "That's the business, Colonel. Information wants to be free. Information wants to be lethal," I corrected. "And you've just armed enemies with blueprints designed to protect American lives." His smile never wavered. Enemies, allies, clients. Those lines blur more every year, don't they? For a moment, silence pressed between us, thick with unspoken histories. Behind us, a man laughed sharply, clinking a glass too hard against his dates. A waitress passed with a tray of flickering candles. Wolf's eyes never left mine. "What's your endgame here?" I asked, voice low, threading steel through every word. "You think selling partial Sentinel schematics will buy you leverage with foreign buyers. You think they won't kill you the second your value dips below your price." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The overhead bulb cast shadows into the hollows of his cheeks, sculpting his face into angles and darkness. "You think too small, Colonel. Sentinel is only the beginning. Defensive protocols are just the surface. Underneath is predictive targeting, AI. And under that is command override." My chest tightened imperceptibly. Command override. The rumored sublayer of Sentinel's architecture. Classified even within Cyber Command. The function that could seize, redirect, or terminate any integrated autonomous system in the network drones, missile defenses, satellite relays. His smirk widened. "Imagine it, Kara. Entire battalions with their command chains severed in one silent line of code. The highest bidder becomes a god." I felt the glass in my hand tremble. I set it down carefully, fingers curling into fists beneath the table where he couldn't see. "You won't get that far," I said softly. His eyes glittered with amusement. "Who's going to stop me?" "You." The dutiful daughter with so much to prove she'd burn her own brother. To save her record, rage flickered through me quick and bright, but I buried it in ice. My face remained blank, my voice calm. "Brandon is irrelevant," I said. "You're the breach vector, and your clock just hit 0. His brow furrowed slightly. Then his gaze flicked to my left ear where the comms bud was just visible beneath my hair. He exhaled a soft laugh, sitting back against the booth. "You always were a good little soldier," he said, eyes cold now, the smirk gone. "But remember something, Colonel, wars aren't won by soldiers. They're won by those who own the battlefield." As he spoke, 2 men in dark jackets approached from behind. Defense intelligence agents. Their movements were quiet, controlled, like wolves closing on prey. Wolf didn't turn to look at them. He simply finished his whiskey, set the glass down with delicate finality, and rose. "Careful, Kara," he murmured, leaning close enough that I smelled cedar cologne and a faint undertone of gun oil. "When you stare into the abyss, sometimes it buys you a drink first." He straightened, slid his hands into his pockets, and let the agents escort him out through the side exit. Their radios crackled softly as they confirmed the extraction. I sat alone, bourbon unfinished pulse, steady but cold, blooming through my chest like winter frost across a windshield. Above the bar, a flat screen flickered soundless with morning news stock tickers, scrolling anchors smiling a bright graphic reading, "Defense market surge," amid new cybersecurity push. My reflection glowed faint against the screen. Tired eyes, loose hair, shadowed face. They thought I was done, that I'd won, that removing Ethan Wolf erased the infection. But viruses mutate. Code is reborn in darker hosts. And as I left the bar stepping into dawn's cold drizzle, I knew this was only the first fracture. Because Sentinel wasn't just a project, it was the future of war. And for the first time since I wore the Silver Eagles, a single truth struck me, with paralyzing clarity. I wasn't sure we deserved to win. At Oriaor 30, I walked into Cyber Command's Joint Operations Center. The entry checkpoint scanned my retina, then my badge. A steel door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a wide corridor lit sterile white. My boots struck tile in quiet rhythm as I moved deeper underground. Past rows of servers humming with invisible electricity. Past silent armed guards watching with eyes that never flickered. When I entered the command floor, my team was already assembled. Screens lined the walls displaying satellite feeds, network security maps, and tactical overlays of regions spanning 4 continents. Digital clusters flickered with cascading lines of code, each representing a live operation somewhere in the world. Major Reese approached, her dark hair pulled back into a severe bun fatigue uniform, crisp, despite the hour. "Colonel," she said, handing me a tablet. "Ethan Wolf is secured at Facility Delta awaiting black site transport. Interrogation protocols initiated. No leaks so far." I scanned the preliminary debrief summary as I walked toward the central console. Wolf's smirk haunted every line. Each evasion, each half-truth, every calculated silence. "Have we confirmed the scope of exfiltrated Sentinel data?" I asked. "Not fully. Preliminary damage assessment confirms partial AI targeting schematics, several Tier 2 encryption modules, and redacted mentions of command override." My jaw tightened. Redacted mentions still confirm its existence. "Yes, ma'am," Reese said quietly. I reached the central platform. 6 officers in operational fatigue stood waiting, backs, straight eyes forward. Intelligence analysts, counter-cyber infiltration leads, electronic warfare specialists. The core of Task Force Sentinel, the unlisted unspoken unit within Cyber Command that hunted breaches with silent precision. "Status," when I ordered. Captain Ewan stepped forward first. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with cold focus. "Ma'am, we've identified secondary infiltration nodes routed through subcontractor VPNs in Singapore and Berlin. Both relay to a primary staging server traced to Prague, under shell company Aurum Tech Systems. Initial infiltration signature matches Aurelius asset deployments, though specific end buyers remain unknown. Containment protocol," I asked. "Activated. All outbound connections are firewalled. Prague node is under satellite ISR with local contacts on standby for kinetic or cyber interdiction." I nodded once. "Prepare for both." Lieutenant Cade spoke next, his fingers flicking rapidly across a holographic keyboard. "Ma'am, behavioral analysis of Ethan Wolf's comms Confirms active coordination with an unknown female asset, likely Mariel Vance, though current evidence is circumstantial. No direct monetary transfers identified yet. They're smarter than bank wires, I said. Check crypto mixes. Cross-reference with offshore blind wallets used in prior Aurelius acquisitions. Yes, ma'am. I scanned their faces one by one. Some looked tired. Most looked ready. All were here for the same reason when enemies attacked from within our own walls. We became the weapon. Listen closely, I said, voice low, but slicing through the humming servers and quiet conversations beyond. This breach is not just data loss. It is strategic decapitation, if leveraged correctly. Sentinel is our cornerstone. If command override is fully exposed, the next battlefield will not be Afghanistan or Taiwan or the Black Sea. I paused, letting their minds complete the thought. It will be here, I finished. Every city, every defense network, every soldier with an integrated system. A silence settled, heavy and alive. Our mission is hunt the betrayer, I continued. We identify every Aurelius node asset and buyer. We recover stolen schematics before distribution. If we fail, no counterattack will matter, because our systems will already belong to them. Major Reese stepped forward, tablet in hand. We've drafted initial operational flow for global interdiction, she said. Priority targets Prague, staging node, Singapore relay, Berlin mirror cluster. Preliminary risk assessment recommends sequential takedown to avoid trigger delays. Negative? I said instantly. We strike simultaneously. Sequential takedown gives them time to initiate data wipes or counter leaks. Prep for 000-hour execution. Yes, ma'am, she said, voice steady despite the enormity of the task. I turned to Cade. I want psychological profiles of every Aurelius Field executive active in the past 12 months. Identify loyalty vulnerabilities, ideological fault lines, personal weaknesses. I want leverage. Before we move. On it. My fingers moved across the central console, pulling up satellite imagery of Prague's Aurum Tech Systems HQ, a sleek glass tower rising from narrow medieval streets. Modern steel skeleton draped in corporate anonymity. We initiate at Oro 300 GMT, I said. Confirm local assets and cyber overwatch readiness within 2 hours. No external coordination beyond need to know. This stays within Task Force Sentinel until containment is achieved. Understood. I exhaled slowly, feeling the burn of recycled air in my lungs. For a brief second, my mind flickered back to Brandon, hunched in that Westbridge conference room, tears streaking his face as he whispered, I didn't know. No, he didn't. But ignorance was still betrayal when it left our soldiers unprotected. My gaze hardened as I studied the satellite feed. Ethan Wolf's words echoed in my chest. Wars aren't won by soldiers. They're won by those who own the battlefield. He was wrong. Wars weren't won. They were enforced, and tonight I would become enforcement incarnate. I looked at my team at their steady eyes and silent readiness. Operation Hunt the Betrayer is active, I said. Dismissed to stations. They saluted in perfect synchrony, the sound of boots clicking against tiles slicing through the quiet. As they dispersed, I stood alone beneath flickering monitors, their blue glow casting long shadows across the war room floor. Somewhere far above dawn would rise soon. But here, buried deep in the earth, the sun meant nothing. Only one thing mattered, that by the time light touched the rooftops of Prague, Singapore, and Berlin, I would own the battlefield again. 0300 GMT. We hit all 3 targets at once. In the Prague staging node, the street outside Aurum Tech Systems HQ was slick with rain. Low clouds pressed down on the Gothic rooftops like a hand smothering breath. Through my secure satellite feed, I watched Task Force Sentinel's forward team move into position. Echo 1 status. I whispered into my comms. Echo 1, in position. Colonel, came the reply. Sergeant Hartley's voice was calm, unhurried. Visual on entry guards. Thermal sweep confirms 8 heat signatures in Lobby 2 at Elevator Bank 3 on sub-basement server floor. I watched their helmet cams flicker between thermal and optical. Gray shapes shifting against black shadows. A gust of wind rattled street signs, masking the soft click of safeties disengaging. Execute breach, I said. 2 operatives crossed to the glass entrance, silent and smooth. A suppressed HK-416 coughed twice. Both guards crumpled without sound. The team flowed in weapons tight to shoulders, slicing the lobby into sectors. Voices murmured over encrypted comms. Clear, clear! Left stairwell. Elevator secured. Hartley moved to the elevator panel, pried it open, and inserted a bypass card. Sparks hissed as the override relay engaged. Colonel, we're riding down, he said. Maintain comms discipline, I replied, shifting my focus to the next feed. In Singapore, the relay node was hidden in an anonymous co-working high-rise downtown. Fluorescent-lit glass walls gleamed sterile in night vision. Outside, neon signs flickered in red kanji and English. Karaoke rooms, 5th floor. 24H money transfer. Bravo 1 confirm breach, confirmed Colonel Lieutenant Park said. Her team moved swiftly, tactical boots silent on polished tile. A security guard rounded the corner, eyes widening. Too late. Park's suppressed pistol spat a single round, dropping him instantly. No hesitation. No mercy. Her team stacked against the server room door, placing microcharges in a precise diamond. 3-2 breach. The door exploded, inward hinges clattering across the floor. Smoke curled through server racks lined in flickering green lights. Park's team fanned out, each operative targeting designated systems. Upload counter-intrusion virus, I ordered. Scramble all outbound data nodes. Initiate 0-day reformat cascade. Executing. I watched lines of code scroll across her heads-up display. Schematics corrupted. Protocols overwritten. Nodes collapsed one by one like dominoes falling into darkness. Then I switched to Berlin. The mirror cluster was buried beneath a decommissioned Cold War bunker, now rebranded as a data storage facility for European financial clients. Steel blast doors, reinforced concrete walls. My HUD feed showed Bravo 2 team in full black tactical kit descending a dim service shaft. Charlie 1 confirm vault access. Standing by for go code came Sergeant Alvarez's low rumble. Go! They moved fast. Door charges flashed silent white. Metal warped inward with a shriek. Flashbangs rolled into darkness, exploding with bright violence. My audio feed muffled under shockwaves and shouted commands. Hostiles down. Securing vault. Helmet cams scanned the interior. Rows of server towers blinked red alarms. Sparks spat from shattered control panels. A technician cowered behind an overturned metal cart, blood dripping from his temple. Bring him in for debrief, I ordered. No civilian casualties if compliant. Copy. Outside dawn seeped through the Berlin skyline, faint gold behind gray clouds. Rain fell in thin slants against glass towers. My team moved through the bunker like a shadow army, planting data scramblers and explosive countermeasures. Nothing remained untouched. Colonel Alvarez said, breathing steady despite the sprint across the vault floor mirror cluster, is offline. Exfiltrating in 5. Confirmed. Leave no trace. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back, feeling tension crackle down my spine, like static discharge. Across 3 continents, Project Sentinel's breached nodes were being dismantled by my operatives. 3 surgical strikes, 0 friendly casualties, minimal collateral, maximum message. Back in the Joint Operations Center, the war room glowed cold blue in flickering screens. Officers moved between consoles in silent precision. Major Reese approached tablet in hand. Colonel, all teams report mission success. Prague staging node has been wiped. Singapore relay corrupted beyond retrieval. Berlin mirror cluster physically destroyed. Casualties none on our side. 2 enemy KIA in Prague, 3 detained for black site transfer. Asset interrogations commencing within the hour. I nodded once. Behind my eyes, fatigue throbbed like a dull blade, but adrenaline burned it away. This was what I was built for. Not the politics, not the public commendations. The hunt, the purge. The silent war fought beneath flags and headlines, where victory was measured in threats neutralized before they ever became bloodshed. My eyes drifted to the primary feed. Prague's Aurum Tech Tower glowed in dawn's pale light. Smoke drifted from shattered glass on the 3rd floor, where my team had breached server rooms. Emergency vehicles swarmed the street below, flashing blue and red against wet cobblestones. To them it looked like another corporate fire, another forgettable crisis in a world full of them. But I knew better. Because this morning, Project Sentinel survived. American soldiers' lives remained protected by systems I had just pulled back from the edge of global weaponization. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the tension seep from my neck and shoulders. When I opened them, my reflection stared back from the black gloss of the operations console. Dark hair pulled into a tight bun, uniform crisp, silver eagles gleaming beneath flickering monitor light. I looked like command. I felt like war. "Major Reese," I said quietly. "Prepare full forensic debrief for OSD review by 1800. Begin drafting preemptive counterintelligence briefs for potential retaliatory leaks." And I paused, feeling the ice harden in my chest. Again initiate black asset pursuit on Ethan Wolf's remaining contacts. Her eyes flickered up from the tablet. "Yes, ma'am." I watched as she moved away, boots echoing across steel and tile. Beyond the war room, the world woke under pale gold dawn. Birds scattered from electrical lines startled by the thrum of helicopters crossing the river. Commuters trudged through rain eyes glazed with sleep and obligation, never knowing the war fought in their shadows. But I knew, and as I stood there reviewing casualty-free kill reports and containment graphs glowing green, I felt no triumph, only readiness. Because war is never over. It just moves, and I move with it. The interrogation room was silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent light above. Ethan Wolf sat cuffed to the steel table, shoulders slumped, eyes unfocused. His expensive shirt was wrinkled collar open, as if he'd tried to breathe easier, and failed. He looked like every traitor does when the walls finally close in small. I stood across from him, arms folded over my chest. My uniform felt heavier here, pressing its authority into my bones. He raised his head slowly, gaze flicking up to meet mine with exhausted defiance. "Do you think this changes anything?" he rasped. His voice cracked on the last word. "Cut off one buyer, 5 more appear. Shut down 1 node, 10 more surface. You're not saving anything. You're just delaying collapse." I tilted my head slightly. Perhaps I said softly. But every day I delay it, soldiers live. Civilians wake up unharmed. That's enough for me. His lips curled into a bitter smile. "Still pretending you're righteous," he whispered. "Still thinking your precision makes you better than chaos." I stepped forward, boots silent on concrete, until my shadow swallowed him where he sat. I lowered my voice to a quiet, lethal calm. Precision isn't about being better. It's about ending threats before they spread. And right now, Ethan, the only chaos in this room is you. The war room was silent except for the low hum of servers and the quiet murmur of operators relaying commands across encrypted channels. Monitors glowed cold blue along the far wall, each displaying tactical overlays of Europe, Asia, the Middle East. I stood at the center console, hands clasped behind my back, watching names flicker across the threatboard. Companies, individuals, shell corporations masking silent buyers hidden behind layers of proxies and unregistered crypto wallets. Major Reese approached, tablet in hand. Her voice was steady, her eyes sharp, despite the hours without sleep. Colonel, preliminary sweeps confirm at least 9 buyers across 4 regions. 2 confirmed in Dubai, 1 in Ankara, 1 in Karachi, 3 across Eastern Europe, 2 unidentified nodes routing through Africa. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension settle into my chest, like steel plates stacking one by one. Any overlap with known Aurelius assets, negative, ma'am, she said. These are third-tier buyers, contractors, local militias, regional security firms, likely intended as test clients before resale to major state actors. I nodded once, eyes scanning the flickering maps. Every blinking red dot was a threat vector capable of turning Sentinel from shield to blade. I could almost see the casualties already. The convoys ambushed by redirected drones, the bases targeted through sabotaged cyber defenses. Initiate Iron Veil Protocol, I said quietly. Reese blinked. Ma'am, confirm Iron Veil confirmed, I replied. My voice remained calm, but the words carried iron weight. Full spectrum interdiction. No buyout negotiations. No asset trades. We erased them all. Yes, ma'am. She turned away, relaying orders down the line. Across the room, teams snapped into motion. Counterintelligence officers began drafting capture or kill packages. Electronic warfare leads retasked satellite ISR to track moving targets. Sleeper field agents activated in cities that didn't officially exist on deployment rosters. I watched it all unfold with cold focus. This was not revenge. This was not punishment. This was enforcement. Colonel Reese called out from her station. Task Force Sentinel teams confirm readiness within 3 hours. Operation Iron Veil will initiate at 0400 GMT. Understood, I said. My gaze drifted back to the maps, red dots glowing like dying embers across a dark ocean of data. Tell them this isn't a hunt. It's a purge. For a moment, silence returned, thick with unspoken truths. I thought of Ethan Wolfe in his black site cell, shaking with the realization that his empire was already crumbling. I thought of Brandon staring into nothing, learning what it meant to live under someone else's command. And I thought of myself standing here in midnight blue silver eagles, gleaming under sterile lights. Not triumphant, not righteous, just necessary. Outside, dawn would soon begin to bleed pale gold across the eastern sky. But inside these walls, the sun had no dominion. Here only precision mattered, presence, performance. And tonight, as Task Force Sentinel prepared to descend on 9 buyers scattered across the world, I knew one truth, with unwavering clarity. Safety isn't passive, peace isn't polite, and when Iron Veil falls, no one escapes unscathed. 0400 GMT. The world was still dark when we struck. In Dubai, Task Force Sentinel's tactical team moved through a penthouse suite overlooking the marina. Silenced weapons coughed once, twice. Security guards crumpled without a sound. Helmet cams streamed footage back to me. In real time, black-clad operators, slicing through marble halls lined with gold fixtures and glass walls, reflecting the rising sun. Target secured, the team lid, whispered. On screen, a middle-aged Emirati man knelt in a tailored suit, hands zip-tied behind his back eyes, wide with terror. He tried to speak. A gloved hand shoved his head down against polished marble. Package ready for extraction, the operator confirmed. In Ankara, the breach happened underground, a private data vault beneath an unmarked office tower. The team rappelled down an elevator shaft, night vision glowing emerald as they stacked at the vault door. Micro-charges flared silent white, smoke, screams. Operators poured in with lethal precision. Nodes secured, servers wiped, uploading residual logs to your terminal. Now, Colonel. I scanned the scrolling code, noting each buyer, contract flag, regional militias, insurgent tech cells, local brokers pretending at global power. Each one deleted line by line under my watch. In Karachi, the Bayer compound erupted in chaos as 2 Apache gunships roared overhead rotors, chopping dawn's humid air into thunder. On-screen, insurgent guards scrambled weapons raised toward invisible enemies in the sky. Then missiles struck. Concrete exploded outward in burning shards. Flames swallowed rooftop sentry posts as my forward team breached from the rear perimeter. Objective neutralized came the calm voice over comms. No friendly casualties. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the quiet settle into my chest. When I opened them, the Berlin feed filled my main screen. Gray clouds pressed low over the city as Task Force Sentinel's European unit moved through a glass corporate tower. Reflections warped black-clad figures into angular shadows as they swept floor by floor, suppressed MP7s slung tight to their chests. Office workers cowered beneath desks, eyes squeezed shut. Target buyer secured, whispered the team lead, initiating node purge. Lines of code flickered across my console as Berlin's mirror cluster collapsed into zeros. Another piece of Sentinel erased from black market reach. All across the world, similar images unfolded. Bangkok, Bucharest, Lagos. 9 buyers in total, each silenced before sunrise. Each node wiped each shell company, burned to ash. Major Reese approached tablet glowing with finalized kill reports and extraction manifests. Colonel Operation Iron Veil is complete, she said softly. Her voice trembled just slightly with exhaustion. 9 buyers neutralized. 0 task force casualties. Thank you, Major, I said, eyes still fixed on the final flickering feed. On screen, Dubai's dawn broke in molten gold across the towers. The camera panned over a restrained buyer being loaded into an armored transport. For a moment, the rising sun glinted off the glass skyline, bathing the team in cold fire. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders like blood from a cut. This was what it meant to protect. Not banners waving over parades, not medals pinned under polite applause. It was this silent rooms full of screens, decisions made with clinical detachment, lives ended before they could end others. Reese stood beside me, quiet, waiting for my next command. Begin strategic debriefs within the hour, I said. Coordinate with SOCOM and OSD for cross-branch dissemination. Sentinel integrity is restored, but command override remains priority. We find it. We secure it. We end this. Yes, ma'am. She moved away, boots echoing against tile, leaving me alone with the war room's cold glow. My reflection stared back from the console screen. Dark hair pulled tight uniform, immaculate eyes calm and endless. Outside, the world began to wake. Traffic rumbled across bridges. Windows lit up in quiet suburban houses. Children rose for school, their futures still theirs to build. They would never know of the men and women who hunted in the shadows to keep them safe. They would never know me. But that was the point. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the hum of servers fill my mind like static rain. Then I opened them again, ready. Because Hunt the Betrayer was over. But the war was only beginning. Thank you for listening to this story. For walking with me through the silence, the precision, the consequences. For feeling my every painful breath, my every determined beat. For understanding that sometimes strength is silence, and victory is not about glory. It is simply about surviving with your soul intact. Your presence here means a lot. I hope my journey has given you courage to be your own.